It was about a man. Nicholson played a corporate billionaire, and Morgan Freeman played a mechanic. And they met in the hospital. Both had gotten to the hospital having had things at the time unknown to them about that was going to ultimately take their life. They were terminal diseases. And over the course of the time that they spent sharing the same room, they did determine that maybe the way to finish out the rest of their life, they didn't have that much longer to live, but they still had the ability, was to form a bucket list. And so that's exactly what they did. I don't know if you have a bucket list, but basically what you're saying is, these are things that in my life I would like to do before I kick the bucket, before I guess, pass from this life. I looked up the etymology of bucket list, and like a lot of things like that, you really don't know where it came from, but it makes sense, I guess. These are things that you want to do before you kick the bucket. And so what happened in the movie, they did those things. They became close friends. Of course, their circumstances were quite different, except at the thrust of the movie was, well, now our circumstances are similar, so we're going to share those things, and we're going to share them with a bucket list. And I can tell you, I'll just tell you practically, if you're going to fulfill a bucket list, having a billionaire friend is a really good thing. That's going to help you a great deal if you want to try to do that, okay? So good luck to you in trying to find that. But what's interesting about that is that when we read the book of Ecclesiastes, and I still have some reservations about whether or not Solomon himself wrote that, or if someone acknowledging what Solomon may have done and the conclusions that Solomon reached, whether or not Koheleth or the preacher, whether or not he was the one who wrote that. But certainly the things that are said in the book of Ecclesiastes, I think make a lot of sense. And while some people look at the book of Ecclesiastes and go, this is a book that I don't, it's kind of depressing to me. It's kind of disconcerting to me. I think just the opposite. I think it's a book that helps you and me understand this is the way that we attack life. This is the way that we approach life. This is the way we tackle life. And if we understand that, then it certainly gives us an opportunity not to make the same kind of mistakes that maybe, whether it was a Solomon or not, but certainly a man with Solomon's wisdom, he would have understood those kind of things. And I want you to think about something that he says in the second chapter. We're going to look at several passages in the book of Ecclesiastes, so that's why I've asked you to turn there. But in the second chapter, in verse 10, he says this, "And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them." That's something that I don't think any of us could do. There may be things that we would like to accomplish, but I don't think any of us could do everything that we wanted to do. But yet this man said, I have done everything. I have not kept anything from myself that I wanted to do. What if you had that opportunity? You ever thought about that? There may be things that we want to do, one or two or three things that we want to do. There may even be things that we've done. But none of us would ever have the opportunity to accomplish everything like this man had that opportunity. We all have desires. We all have things that we want to do. If you ask me, Kenny, what's on your bucket list? I could give you 4 or 5 pretty strong things that before I pass in this life I'd like to do. But we all have desires, and we all have things that we want to do. Matter of fact, how often in our lifetime do we say, I want, or I need, or I wish I could have, or I would like to have, and then we fill in those blanks with things that we want to do. Other things that we'd like to have a life where we had no dark days. Wouldn't you like to have a life where you don't have any dark days, where you have no depressing times? Where you have no problems, you have no glitches, you have no surprises, at least negative surprises, you have no illnesses. Well, we all are saying, when you say that, Kenny, that's not going to happen. And that's not going to happen. But I would suggest to us that wanting things, whether it's material things or if it's wanting things not to happen that are negative, all those things are not necessarily wrong. But I think what it does, it may in some way, it may reveal a dissatisfaction with what I believe Solomon saw as the real satisfaction. And I want to talk to you about that for just a few minutes tonight. This lesson, the thrust of it was something that I wanted to talk to you about this morning, but again, which is my prerogative, I chose to go a different direction this morning. And so if you were expecting this sermon this morning, I'm sorry, you're getting it tonight. But I want us to think about it from a little different perspective. I want you to turn to, again, this second chapter of Ecclesiastes, and I want us to begin reading in verse 24. Look at Ecclesiastes 2, beginning in verse 24. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight, but to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Well, what I want us to do is maybe just draw some conclusions from what he says not only in these verses, but in something that he says in chapter 5 and chapter 6 as well. Here's the first thing that I would suggest to us. And this, I think we know this practically, but yet we continue to try to have things and gain things and do things to help us reach maybe another level of enjoyment with our lives. But here's the deal. There is no ultimate satisfaction in things. There is no way, no chance for us to say, well, I've done this, and so there are no more ultimates for me to fulfill in this life. There are no I have arrived moments. There are no, wow, this is it. It doesn't get any better than this moments. Those feelings come and go. There are times where we're able to do things and go places and do things that maybe not most are able to do. Nothing wrong with that. There's everything I think that's right about that. God's blessed us and given us an opportunity to do that. But those feelings come and go. And what I find interesting about what he says here is what he says in verse 24 of Ecclesiastes 2. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. If I ask you, do you agree with that? I'm not asking you, but if I did, how many of you would raise your hands and say, yeah, well, that's exactly how I feel? I mean, the wise man said, there is nothing, and remember, we're talking about somebody who did not hold back anything. He allowed himself everything that he could do, and he could afford it. He allowed everything that he wanted. He could do that. And he says, but there is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. And I want to ask the question, do you agree with that? Because we know it's true. Because the wise man said it. It's inspired. We know it's true. But we, I think, find difficulty with those very kind of things. Nothing is better than to eat and to enjoy labor. Can we do that? Here's what I want you to think about. We can all do that. Now, we all can't fulfill everything we want to do in our life, but all of us can eat. All of us can labor. All of us can do those kind of things. And what the wise man says is, if you can do that, you can have the greatest satisfaction in your life if you're doing what you ought to be doing. And that's what he's going to get to. Let me just ask you a question. I'm not against bigger cars, nor am I against bigger houses. I've got a nice truck and I've got a big house. But if I think for 1 minute that having those kind of things are the things that are going to make life enjoyable for me, I have missed it. And I know that practically we all understand that. But the fact of the matter is, we have to live like we understand that. Having more things. And please listen carefully to what I'm saying. Having more things or fulfilling a bucket list isn't wrong. I don't see how having more necessarily is wrong, or fulfilling some list of the ultimate things that I think I want to do. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think God anywhere tells us that that's wrong. But it'll never be the ultimate. Because the ultimate is something that every single one of us can fulfill. Isn't that interesting? The thing that God says cannot happen, is the best thing that can happen to us, is the thing that all of us can do. Don't you find that interesting? Has nothing to do with how much money you make or what kind of power you have or the wealth that you have accumulated. It has nothing at all to do with any of that. It simply has to do with your ability to enjoy what I would call the simple things in life that are really a gift of God. Look at chapter 3, verse 13. Or start with 12. He said, I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives. And that's a very common theme throughout this book. And also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. Isn't that what he just said in chapter 2, verse 24? He says it not only in these two places, but he says it multiple times in this book. And I think he says that because he wants to make sure that you understand that. And here's a man saying this to us who tried everything. I mean, absolutely everything. And he says it just goes back to these simple, enjoyable pleasures in life that a person can have. But the caveat is this. Chapter 3, verse 13. It is the gift of God. See, that's the difficulty with most of this. When we somehow separate what God has blessed us with, by somehow thinking that it's we that have achieved that. I've had some conversations even recently with one particularly who's a member here. And I've had conversations with others of you that deal with this very kind of issue about having things and how we use those kind of things and understanding what really gives us enjoyment in this life. And chapter 3, verse 13 tells us that these things that we have are a gift from God. It's not telling us that they're wrong, but they're telling us that God has caused those things and helped us have those things. Chapter 2 and verse 24 says they are from the hand of God. Yes, we may have abilities that help us in this way, but the fact of the matter is that God has given us. He's given these things to us as a gift. What can a gift do? You can take a gift back. Because it's a gift and because God gives it to us, He doesn't have to give those things to us. So whatever we have is from God. Now listen to that. Let that sink in. Whatever we have is from God. It is a gift. If you keep that in mind, I think what he's saying here is, he's not saying you don't do all of these things that exceed eating and enjoying the fruit of your labor and the toil of your life. He's not saying don't enjoy those things, but he's saying just keep in perspective and understand that if you have the ability to do those things, God has given you that ability. Let's go to chapter 6 for just a moment. Turn over to chapter 6. I want you to look at, and again, some of this will just reiterate some of the things that I want to stress to you tonight. But I think it all says some really good things for us to consider. I want to talk to you for just a minute about abundance, prosperity. Prosperity and abundance are relatively subjective concepts, aren't they? But wouldn't you say that compared to a lot of folks, not only in this country, but especially in other countries, that we are people of great abundance and prosperity? And some people don't have those things. And if they do, what the wisdom writer says is, if you have those things, understand that they can be taken away. Look at chapter 5. Let's look at the last 3 verses of chapter 5 before I get into chapter 6. Again, we're still in Ecclesiastes. Notice verse 18. Here is what I have seen. Don't you love that language? I mean, it's just like, okay, I'm doing this for you. I have the ability. I've done it. Now here's what I've learned from it. Here is what I have seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and to drink and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which God gives him. For it is his heritage. Again, we're talking about that. Okay, says the same thing. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. Notice who's given it to him. To every man whom God has given riches and wealth. Let me tell you something. If you have riches and wealth, you have it because God's given it to you. That's what this says. I'm not discounting the fact that you have worked for it, or you have abilities, or you have training, and you have education. But God's given it to you. It's a gift. God can take it away from you as quickly as He's given it to you. And we have to understand that. Verse 20, for he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. I preached a lesson on these particular 3 verses not too very long ago. You may even remember that, because I had several of you after the lesson comment on this verse 20 especially, that says, for he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. Referring to those who do understand what abundance can do, but who have put it all in the right perspective. And I think this passage says that. They may have abundance, but God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. Now, let's go to chapter 6. Verse 1. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun. Okay? We went from the good news to not so good news. But there is an evil, he goes on to say. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common. Look at it. It is common among men. Okay, so he's setting the table to tell you what I'm about, this evil that I'm about to talk to you about. It is prevalent. It's common. You ready to hear about it? For a man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor. There it is again. Why do you have? If you have, why do you have? Because God's given it to you. It's a gift. God's given it to you. Don't ever separate. That's the problem. Some people separate what they have from the fact that God's given it to them. And when you do that, he says, you're going to make this is an evil, and you're going to make this mistake. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor, so that he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires. Now, you may say, well, that's not me. Let me tell you something. That's most of us. If not all of us. He lacks nothing for himself of all he desires. There's not a lot, at least for many of us, that we want to do that we can't do. Right? You agree with that? Read on. Yet God does not give him power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity, and it's an evil affliction. Here's a person who's got it all, and yet he doesn't know how to use it. He doesn't know the ultimate fulfillment of what he needs to do with it. So it says, verse 3. Well, verse 2 it says, this is vanity. It's an evil affliction. There's the evil that he's talking about. You have it, you don't know how to use it. Verse 3, if a man begets 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with goodness, or indeed he has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better than he. You see that? That's pretty strong language. For it comes in vanity and departs in darkness, and its name is covered with darkness. I mean, it is total devastation. To have it and not understand how to deal with it, how to use it for goodness, indeed, it's devastational. It's evil. Verse 5, though it has not seen the sun or known anything, this has more rest than that man. Even if he lives 1,000 years, twice, but has not seen goodness. Do not all go to one place. See, it's not the wealth and the honor and the riches that gives you the ultimate enjoyment. It's the understanding of how to deal with that, how to use that. I think that's what he's talking about. And again, I'm just going to say to us that most of us enjoy abundance. We enjoy abundance far more than most. And here's my question. Here's my question to every single one of us. Can we enjoy abundance the way God intends? Or are you continually, maybe me, are we continually after something that's never going to give us the ultimate wow, the ultimate, man, I've reached the top? We know that, don't we? We know that practically. So maybe we need to adjust how we view what it is that we have. I don't want to tell you something. I am very glad to go to Zimbabwe, to kind of be the eyes and ears for all of you and the elders, and to get a first-hand view of what we are seeking to do as we send money to try to help. It's not just money. We offer prayers and we have concerns, but our money is being sent to help brethren who are there, and brethren who, from everything we can tell, are needing help with just the simple necessities of life. As I remember Mitch in one of our meetings when we were first talking about this, we were talking about, are we going to help them? Mitch said, they got to eat. I can remember him vividly saying, they do. They have to eat. And you know, even people that have to eat can enjoy the thing that is nothing better than, right? Eating and drinking and laboring. They can do that. It's not about wealth. It's not about abundance. That's what he's saying. But the reason that I bring that up is I'm just going to tell you, I anticipate being a changed person when I come back. I'm going to tell you that. And I anticipate being a changed person because what I think I'm going to see when I get over there is something that I think I'm not going to be able to get out of my head. Now that's not a statement. I'm not trying to overthink that right now because I haven't been there. But I mean, part of why I'm going is practically to determine if us sending this amount of money on a monthly basis, at least giving the elders and all of you a better feel for that, and trying to determine, is this something that we need to continue to do? Because it's a fairly large amount of money. Okay, so that's a lot of money per month to be sending to any one area. But from what we can deduce and from what the elders can deduce right now, it is a much needed thing that we do, that we can do. And there are other churches that we and they are familiar with that do the very same thing. But I have a strong suspicion that when I get back on that plane, if God wills, that I get back on that plane and start heading back this way, the question of abundance, and what I have, and what Beth and I have, and what we all have, I have a strong suspicion that I'm going to look at that a little differently. I do that now. I struggle with it now. And again, it's a subjective thing. Don't miss. I'm not saying that everybody here has got everything that we need and we all have them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that generally speaking, among this group, we live in abundance. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But I struggle with that. And may I say something else to you? I struggle with how to talk to you about that. I struggle with how to deal with it myself, and I struggle with how to talk to you about it. And in conversations that I've had with other people who are part of this church, they struggle with how they deal with it. That's the point of talking to me about it. And I think what these passages do is they help us get a better grasp on what it is that we need to do. And I think the conclusion that I would reach about these passages is we need to handle the gifts that God has given us. We need to be able to handle that so that the ultimate fulfillment that we find from that is what God wants. And may I say, the fact that I think some of us are thinking about that because it's affecting us, I think that's a good thing. We have most of us have a lot of, let's just say it, many of us, some of us, have a lot of money that's sitting in a bank or that's sitting in a portfolio somewhere. I'm not against any of that. I've got it too. But maybe we need to readjust. Maybe I need to readjust some of how I view that. It's a hard question, isn't it? It makes you feel a little uneasy, doesn't it? It should. And I'm not indicting anybody. If I'm indicting anybody, I'm indicting myself. I'll just be clear about that. But I think it's something that we need to concern ourselves with. Because he goes on to say, look at verse 7 of chapter 6. All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the soul is not satisfied. Again, we're talking about perspective here, you see. Look at verse 8. For what more has the wise man than the fool? The answer, that's none. What does the poor man have who knows how to walk before the living? I'll tell you what he has. He has more than the rich man because he understands. He's got the right perspective about it all. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Whatever one is, he has been named already, for it is known that he is man. And he cannot contend with him who is mightier than he, since there are many things that increase vanity. How is man the better? For who knows what is good for man in life, all the days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? Those are rhetorical questions. The second one is, who can tell a man what will happen after him under the sun? God knows. God knows. So I would just suggest to all of us that we need to give real serious, and again, I'm talking to myself, we need to give very serious attention to abundance, prosperity. Because what the wise man says is, if you don't, it's a great evil. You can't enjoy life. You can't enjoy these things that are really nothing better unless you're doing what God wants you to do. And that's obviously the ultimate conclusion. Remember to use what we have. Use what we have. I have in my notes the last passage is to read chapter 5 verses 18 through 20, but we've done that. So I'm not going to go back and rehash that with you. But let me just say, really what's driven these ideas, it was the question. The question initially asked to me was, does God give us prosperity? Well, I think these passages we read tonight have said exactly that. Now, that doesn't mean he gives everybody prosperity, but I think he gives prosperity to those who have the ability, who work for it, and who's have those opportunities. That's pretty clear to me. But he says to all of us, regardless of what abundance we have, you need to be able to use that the right way. And I think it's good to talk about these things because I think personally that we all struggle with it. I struggle with it. I've told you that before. I continue to struggle with it. So maybe looking at passages like this help us try to reevaluate who we are and what we have, how we use it. Not just personal things, it's collective things. Things that this church has an abundance. And we need to be concerned about that. We need to think about that. We don't know if we have tomorrow to live. There are a lot of things that we've got to take into consideration that have to do with what God has done for us and how God has blessed us. And I hope all of us are willing to look carefully at that. Well, those are my thoughts for you tonight. Hope that it maybe challenges your thinking, maybe spurs some thought in your mind to maybe think about how you do with what you have. And I hope that all of us, myself included, can be helped. If you have a spiritual need tonight that we can help you with, we'll sing an invitation song. And if we can help you with that, let that be known by coming forward as we stand and as we sing.